Good evening, and welcome to our third installment of Haverford Alumni in the Arena. My name is Andrew Bailey, and I'm a member of the class of 2002 and currently serve as the Director of Alumni Relations at the Haverford School. Before we get started, please note that the audience is encouraged to ask questions by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We will spend the last 5 to 10 minutes of the presentation answering questions that are submitted. And now to our guest speaker. A member of the class of 2007, Benjamin Grant is the founder at Overview. Overview uses satellite and aerial imagery to demonstrate how human activity and natural forces shape our Earth. This perspective provides a powerful look at the planet where we live and the civilization we are creating. Through Overview's imagery, shop, and collaborations, they aim to inspire the Overview effect. Mr. Grant is the author of Overview, A New Perspective of Earth, co-author of Overview Time-Lapse with Haverford alumnus Tim Doherty, and founder of the Daily Overview Instagram account that currently has over 1 million followers. Please join me in welcoming Ben as he takes us through Overview, How We Change the Earth. Ben.
Thank you so much, Andrew. First of all, I just want to say it's absolutely an honor to be doing this. I remember the In the Arena series when I was a student, and all of the speakers that would come into Centennial Hall and talk about all of the interesting things they were doing in the world and how inspiring that was to me as a student. And I hope what I'm able to share with you this evening is just as inspiring. So as Andrew mentioned, I am the founder of Overview. I'm going to share my screen with you now and jump into some slides. All right. So Overview is a project that I started in 2013. The name Overview comes from the phrase the overview effect, which was coined by science writer Frank White in 1987, after he had the opportunity to speak to a number of astronauts who went to outer space and had the opportunity to see either a large portion of the planet or the entirety of the planet for the first time. They saw views like this, traveling in the International Space Station, going around the planet at 17,500 miles an hour. And they spoke about how they were profoundly impacted by this new perspective, what it meant to be a human being, what it meant to be alive, to share this planet that we all call home. I was profoundly taken by this idea of the overview effect. I didn't know what to do with it, how it might impact my life, but just shared the idea with friends. Then one day I opened a mapping program on my computer, and I'll give a little bit more context later as to why I was doing this, but opened the mapping program on my computer. And because I was so taken by this idea of the overview effect, when it asked me to search for a place or an address, it was my instinct on that day in December of 2013 to type in Earth. I was searching for Earth, thinking it would zoom out and show the whole planet like this. This is what I expected would happen that day. But to my surprise, when I pressed enter, it instead zoomed in. And this is what I saw. This is Earth, Texas, which is a small town in northern Texas. And it was my instinct at the time to take that view, as you see here, and start to play with the image, to rotate it, to compose it, to make it look as beautiful as possible, to make it look like a modern piece of art. And this image in this place would forever change my life. Soon enough, I started to compile a whole set of images and created the website Daily Overview, with the simple idea that I would post one of these images each day, focused on the places where humans are impacting the planet. And just to give a quick introduction to the images that you might see on Daily Overview, I'm going to share a few images with you now. So first, here you can see deforestation in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. The untouched tracts of rainforest are seen there on the right side of your screen. And the area on the left is the previously forested land that has been cleared for mechanized agriculture and farming. This is an iron ore mine in the Pilbara region of Western Australia. So 98% of mined iron ore is used to create stainless steel. So it's a beautiful and scary scar on the places on the earth, forcing us to contemplate where the things that are in our home, like appliances, refrigerators, dishwashers, come from. This is a solar concentrator in Seville, Spain. So what you can see on your screen there are thousands of mirrors arrayed in concentric circles, all pointing towards this incredibly tall tower, about 100 meters tall, seen there at the center, which contains molten salt at the top, which gets heated by the light reflected upwards from the mirrors below, which generates steam and spins turbines and powers tens of thousands of nearby homes in Seville, Spain. This is the city of Barcelona, specifically the Eixample district here. So overview often examines these urban centers and the planning that takes place there. This city is known for its characteristically gridded streets with octagonal intersections there, which allow for more street parking and better ventilation throughout the entire city. So that's just an example of what you might see on overview. Oh, actually, here's one more. Sorry about that. These are the ships outside the port of Singapore, some of the largest ships in the world, more than 1,000 feet long, container ships and also oil vessels that carry these materials all around the world from this massive shipping center. So you can find these images on our Instagram. As Andrew mentioned, we're lucky enough now to have more than 1 million followers. So if you go to our feed as seen here, you can scroll through and you can select an image. And what's important is that we always include the context with what you're seeing on the feed. And this is an example of Venice. So you can see the image and we try to capture your attention with the visual, but always share the information below. A few sentences, super digestible, easy to take away. And that's kind of the daily perspective. That's the dose of information that you'll receive by following our feed. Now, how did I get here? That's something I want to talk about today. And this is a rare opportunity for me because I don't normally give this backstory about my time at Haverford that ultimately all led to this. If you had told me when I was graduating high school that I would be considered an author or even called an artist or run an Instagram page that had more than 1 million followers, first of all, Instagram did not exist when I was at Haverford, but I would never have believed you, right? It's been a long and winding road to get to this point. But looking backwards, you know, sometimes it makes a bit more sense. So when I look back at my time at Haverford, one of the first things that I remember is that athletics were some of the most important things for me. I came to Haverford, one of the main reasons was in 6th grade, the Haverford teams competed against other schools while other schools had to wait till 7th grade to be competitive in that way. So it was a big deal for me. Sports were a huge deal for me. I love soccer. I was the soccer team goalie that won the Interact Championship for the first time in almost a decade when I was in 10th grade. That was a huge part of my life. I had more fun than ever before playing for the basketball team. My senior year was the most fun I've ever had playing any sport. And rowing became a huge part of my life at Haverford. Here are a couple pictures when my doubles partner and I, Matt Schritzel, won the city championships by just a couple feet over Malvern Prep. And then a few weeks later, won the national championship in the senior double. I learned so much from my time on the athletic fields and on the river at Haverford. So much about determination, so much about teamwork. But what I really want to share tonight is that I always took a lot of pride in the fact that I wasn't just a soccer player or that I wasn't just a basketball player or a rower, but Haverford really valued the fact that students could be more than just one thing and not just an athlete as well. This is the box that's still on my desk at my childhood home, the Ironman Award, which I received for playing 3 sports for all 4 seasons of all of high school. Something that really mattered to me a lot and was really honored that the school recognized that. But again, I wasn't just an athlete, right? When I think back to my time at Haverford, I was also focused on creative writing, and I won the creative writing prize my junior year. And that was something that really stood out in my mind, that I wasn't just this one thing. I also started the poetry club during my time in high school and had mentors like Laird Kopp, Mr. Kopp, I should say, who encouraged that side of me and recognized that you could be more than just one thing at Haverford. So that's something I wanted to share tonight too. I think in my time creating overview, I could never just be one thing in making this project. I wasn't just a photographer. I also had to write. I also had to be a historian. I also had to be good at marketing to make it all possible. So I left Haverford with a lot of lessons, a lot of great mentors, like Colonel Miller, seen here. This is at graduation. And one thing that he said to me that I think I'll always remember is that there is no luck. Luck is the place where opportunity and preparation intersect. And I think there have been a lot of moments with overview where I thought, you know, wow, I got lucky and this big break happened or this story got posted in the media, but there was a lot of work, there was a lot of preparation that made it all possible. And I would be remiss tonight if I didn't share this image. I promised a few friends from the class of 2007 that I would work this into the In the Arena talk. There were a lot of fun times at Haverford as well. This is us with Colonel Miller dressing up in his World War I and World War II paraphernalia, asking questions like why and figuring out the significance of it all. So after Haverford, I was lucky enough to go to Yale. And the rowing side of my Haverford career was super important and made it possible for me to go to a school like Yale. Here's a picture of me competing in college. I rowed for all 4 years. I have significantly less body fat and significantly larger arms than I do now in this picture. But again, that Haverford experience set me up for an opportunity like this, which would profoundly change my life. I had to work harder than ever before rowing for Yale and making it possible to not just be an athlete, but to also be a scholar athlete and to take school very seriously as well. And during my time at Yale, I learned that I did significantly better in the classes that were not, as we called them, the gut classes, the things that you thought would be easy and be good to get a good grade, but really diving into the things that I was passionate about. And one of the subjects was art history, which I learned really late in my college career that I was interested in, and it would eventually influence a lot of my life. So after Yale, I was lucky enough to get a job at Lippincott, which is a prestigious brand consulting firm in New York City. There I learned a lot about telling stories and how you can make a logo or an idea into something powerful and meaningful. But want to share a kind of personal side story that when I graduated from Yale, I received this as a graduation present from my parents. This is a Nikon D3100 DSLR camera, which is the most basic digital camera that you can get. It's pretty nice, but this would forever change my life because I was able to develop a hobby or an interest outside of my consulting job, outside of my usual daily work, that would inspire me in so many different ways. So I was living in New York City after I graduated college, and I became obsessed with photography. The subject matter that I often focused on, as you can see here, was architectural landscapes. The buildings in New York City, you could go on these walks for hours and hours, always finding interesting angles or things to shoot or looking up or looking at the lines and the angles. It was just incredible and so inspiring. During this time, I was also surrounded by a lot of creative colleagues at my consulting firm who inspired me to do creative projects like painting. And these are some of the paintings that I created in those first couple of years in New York City, where I fell in love with the abstract expressionist art movement, often at galleries or museums in New York City. And I was often trying to just model and recreate imagery from my favorite artists like Pete Mondrian or Frank Stella, some of the images you can see here. And I learned a lot about composition. I never showed these paintings to anyone, but I learned a lot myself and really found a new means of expressing something creatively. So when I look at the visual inspiration for overview, when I compose an image, when I make one of these images like I was showing you before, I'm often, building on this experience, building on this love of art history. So a few examples of that I want to share. This cattle feedlot in Texas in the United States has this grid and color blocking pattern, which looks a lot like this Pete Mondrian painting, my favorite artist. This is Ipanema Beach in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. So the beach is that center strip, which looks a lot like a Barnett Newman strip painting. This is deforestation in Bolivia, the image I showed before, oriented slightly differently, which looks a lot like an Ellsworth Kelly color block painting. And this is Lake Mead in the United States, which looks a lot like another one of my favorite artists, Clifford Still, who was a painter who was trying to recreate the American West in this abstract, craggy, mean manner. And I often joke, I wish I could bring him back to life and show him this comparison and say, you are doing a very good job of that. So moving on. I want to talk a bit about the technical side of the work that I'm doing. Overview now has 6 different partnerships, 4 with private companies, 2 with government organizations. That makes this all possible. And there might be a lot of questions that come up later, and I hope to answer some of them now, but also hope to inspire some more questions. So please type them in the chat. Each of the different partners that we work with has different constellation of satellites that have different imagery resolutions. So you can see them all listed here. The main company we work with, Maxar, has a 30 centimeter resolution. What that means is 1 pixel on your screen equals 30 centimeters on the ground. But to make that a bit more powerful, a bit more meaningful, this is an example of that camera in action. So what you're seeing here is the entirety of the Bay Area captured from 800 miles away with one of these satellite cameras at an angle. It is an absolutely stunning image with crisp resolution. It gives you an example that you could take a picture on the Golden Gate Bridge seen here with a beach ball on it in full resolution from Los Angeles. I am in this image right now. That's where I'm located in San Francisco. And if you zoom out again, you can see that incredible context. So I think it's been pretty powerful to take this technology, which is typically used for other things like agricultural monitoring or monitoring of mining or government surveillance, and using it for artistic purposes focused on environmental issues. So a lot has happened since I launched this project in 2013, and I just want to give a few examples of how this imagery has gotten out there into the world in different ways. Here's one example of the images being used digitally. This is at a massive office complex in Barcelona, Spain. So you can see the screens there in the lobby of this building. Again, the images are always provided with context to explain what you're seeing. And this is focused on, again, environmental issues and focus on the places that we need to protect and cherish. It's been incredible to get these images exhibited outside in the public sphere. This is a show that's been up in Sweden for the last 4 summers. These public space constructions show the images at all times of the day, under lighting at nighttime as well, and making the images accessible, not behind an exclusive gallery door, but where anyone can stumble upon them, any age, and make it part of their day. You can see that happening in this video here. Into the office environment. So this is a 30-foot mural that we did at the Facebook office here in the Bay Area, giving people context of where they are. The office is included is a very small piece of this larger mural. But again, bringing that perspective to unexpected places. And it was amazing to install this mural and see everyone from the security guard to an engineer to the office manager to the person who ran the office to all be amazed by it, to all go up to it and pick out specific details of where they've lived or where they visited, and really an opportunity to bring people together and start conversations. We also sell these images on our website and through partnerships. This is a line of prints that is available at CB2 stores, and we also have a full selection of prints that are available on our website. I was lucky enough in 2016 to get my first book deal, which was an incredible opportunity to compile all of the images that have been created for the project so far into one cohesive piece of literature. I had never done anything like this before and learned so much in the process. Because the images had always been focused on the places where humans impact the planet, this book was chaptered and structured accordingly, with chapters like where we live, you can see there, where we harvest, all about agriculture, where we extract, all about mining, and was an incredible opportunity to get the work out there into the world. The book was more successful than I could have ever imagined. It's been translated into 9 languages so far. It was also adapted into a children's version of the book, which is targeted at middle school students. Again, making the images as accessible as possible, rewritten so that it can be entirely understood and seen by the world. Now, in the last 6 or 7 years, we've captured so many images. This is a full look at the archive over just the last couple of years alone. And going through those images, it was clear that we witnessed not only a lot of change, these kind of single moments of change and impact that had taken place over time, but we were even able to witness change within those 6-7 years. And that led to this new project, Time-Lapse. Time-Lapse has been turned into a book that I co-authored with Haverford alum Tim Doherty. And you can see how it's made possible here. This is just one of our imagery providers at one particular location, like the first image that I created. And you can look at a particular area and go back over time and see the change that has taken place. Now, for this book, it was an interesting challenge to go through all of these archives and find these golden nuggets, find these imageries where you could piece together stories about change and see what is taking place on our world today. So now I want to walk through some of the stories from this new book, Time Lapse, that paints this picture of our planet as we know it now in 2020 and 2021. So this is the cover of Time Lapse. You can see the Occidental Glacier there on the cover, a story about glaciers that have been receding over the last decades as the planet warms. But let's dive into the story. What is the story of the planet now? It starts with civilization, right? This is the world we inhabit. This is the world we live in. We move through. And that story primarily is focused on cities. More of us live in cities now than ever before. That number will only grow moving into the future. And a particularly compelling example of that growth is seen here with the city of Las Vegas. This first picture is captured in 1989, the year that I was born. So if you look at a 3-decade change just recently, you can see the growth of the city fourfold, from 700,000 people to more than 3 million today. And you can see it just sprawl out into the surrounding desert. The second chapter is about transportation. So now that we have these major urban centers, we move through them from one to the other, and we create massive change to make this possible. Here's one particularly crazy example. What you see is just a section of farmland here outside Beijing not too long ago in 2012. This area was then converted into the largest single terminal airport in the world, the new Beijing airport, which has a footprint of more than 1 million square feet. Just an absolutely staggering complex that when things get back to normal, perhaps with normal travel and normal flights, will accommodate more than 60 million travelers every year. The last chapter of civilization is consumption. So thinking about the things that we buy, thinking about the things that we eat, things that we consume on a daily basis, one of those things is electricity. So a story that brings that to light, no pun intended, is this of Paris. So this is Paris seen during the day. If you compare it to an image captured later, you see the city come alive. And this forces us to contemplate, where do we get our energy from? Paris in particular gets 50% of its energy from cogeneration plants, about 35% from nuclear power, but less than 1% of its energy from solar and wind renewable sources. So as we move into the future, that's a problem we're really going to need to tackle. How do we shift towards more renewable energy sources? And that sets up the next chapter, utilization. All of these facets and elements of civilization are powered by Earth's natural resources. And that comes down to 3 things: water, land, and raw materials. So let's start with water. Thinking about consumption, this is the Aral Sea, which is in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. The Aral Sea was once the 3rd largest lake in the world. Now it's basically non-existent. And what happened here is that they diverted the rivers that fed the Aral Sea to create a cotton industry that never existed before. Again, thinking about consumption, the clothes that we wear all have to come from somewhere. And we can see an environmental disaster that happened here. Major crisis as the fishing industry collapsed in the region. There were all sorts of dust storms that were unprecedented, and the industry of cotton perhaps won't be sustainable as well, because they'll run out of water and it will collapse too. The second chapter of utilization is land. So the book is not all doom and gloom. There are also positive stories as well too, and this is just a particularly beautiful example. The tulip fields in Holland bloomed every year, just around this time in April each year. So if you can compare an image captured in March just before to one captured in April, you can watch the flowers bloom in this magnificent cascade of color. Again, the book is not all horrible environmental catastrophe. There are also positive stories as well. The last chapter of utilization is a pretty difficult one to see. We think about the raw materials that we are extracting from the earth to power civilization. Modern day society has a dependence on fossil fuels, which we've been burning for more than 100 years now. This is a particularly disastrous example. This is the Athabasca oil sands in northern Canada, one of the largest sources of bitumen on earth. So the oil there is mixed with sand, and there's a completely carbon intensive extraction process to separate the oil from the sand. And this region has continually expanded over time. You can see it first here in 1997, 2001, 2009, and 2015, as the world's demand for oil has grown and grown and grown. There is such a large supply here that you could extract 2.5 million barrels of oil a day for the next 186 years, right? So it doesn't seem like we're going to run out of fossil fuels anytime soon. We've gotten better at finding new ways of extracting them. And there's going to need to be a conscious decision to move to more renewable energy sources, more sustainable energy sources, less carbon intensive energy sources if we're going to create a sustainable society. And that introduces the last chapter of the book, Reaction. So we're doing all of these things in our civilization where there's all this utilization of Earth's natural resource. What are we seeing as a result of it? And I think it can be best summed up in one graph seen here. I'll give a quick rundown of what you're seeing. This is atmospheric CO2 concentration over the last 800,000 years. And I just checked before the presentation about where we're currently at. There are 417 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere right now. And that number, as you can see, is completely off the charts. We are entering into an unprecedented time, and we are already seeing the reaction from Earth's natural systems as a result of this. So I just want to give a couple examples that we're seeing just in the past couple of years of these environmental events. So first, there was flooding in the Midwest of the United States in March of 2019. That was the wettest period on record in the United States, which destroyed 1 million acres. So this is at the Nebraska-Iowa border. And when I show the change, as you'll see here, you can see this area completely overrun with water. Another example, which was not too long ago at all, it feels like a lifetime ago, but the bushfires in Australia scorched millions of acres. What you're seeing here is a massive area, roughly 38,000 acres consumed by flames. Lots of wildlife was absolutely demolished, like the koalas in this disaster. And the flames were so big that one day after this picture was taken, you could see this massive gray cloud coming off the coast of Australia here. Unprecedented weather event there in Australia. Similar thing happened here in California last year, the biggest fire season on record. And we expect to see more and more of this going forward in the future as the planet continues to warm. But we're also responding to the environmental disasters that we're seeing, right? We're not just complacent. And hopefully we'll see more and more of this. In this book, hope to show examples of this human response. And we can do two things as a response. And I want to give one example of each. So there's so much carbon in the atmosphere. The best technology that we know of to address that issue are trees, right? We have so many of them. And this is an example of a reforestation project. The Great Green Wall of Africa hopes to plant 250 million acres of trees in the Sahel region. This is an example in Mauritania and Senegal. If it is successful, 250 million tons of carbon dioxide could be removed from the atmosphere, and it could also create 350,000 rural jobs. So this is the Great Green Wall before, and this is the Great Green Wall after. Projects like this need to get a spotlight shown on them. So they need the significant investment that's required to keep them going and hopefully succeed. So I hope Overview is able to shine a light on projects like the Great Green Wall to make them successful. Another way of creating a better future would be to do things differently. So what you see here is a distribution center in Los Angeles that had this massive roof not being used for anything whatsoever. That was converted into the largest rooftop solar installation in Southern California, the second largest in the world behind Apple headquarters here in the Bay Area. But again, being super thoughtful about the land that we have. If it's not being used for anything, think about this. This now powers 5,000 nearby homes. So the subtitle of Time Lapse, the book, is How We Change the Earth. While on one hand, I think that can look backwards, right? It's this visual history, as you've seen here, of how we've changed the planet so far. But it can also be forward-looking as well. By better understanding how we've changed the Earth to date, we can better understand how we can change it going forward. And I hope this human reaction, these last two examples, speak to that potential, speak to these solutions that we'll need to create a better world. So that is the book Time Lapse. It was an absolute honor to create it. And I hope those stories are powerful and compelling for you to see. So just to wrap up, I was thinking so much as I was putting this talk together about how my Haverford influence inspired me in this career track. And Haverford is a school of the liberal arts, right? You're combining so many different things: science, English, history, and I think all of those come to light in this project. But I also wanted to emphasize the fact that in my time at Haverford, I was encouraged by my teachers and even my peers to not be just one thing, right? I wasn't just the soccer goalie or a rower or the guy who started poetry club. I could be all of those things. And I think kind of having that experience and bringing that to life through my college existence and then my professional existence encouraged me to try and start a project like this and helped me make it possible. So I don't think there's a better memento or place on campus that speaks to this better than the gym, where I spent so much time. And I remember going to the gym the first time on my first day at Haverford in sixth grade, and it being this shrine to athletics, to achievement, but carved above the entrance. And I hope all the students, when you're there back on campus, you'll take note of this. This phrase, this Latin phrase, is carved above the entryway to the gym. Mens sana in corpore sano, a strong mind in a strong body. This is something that has stuck with me my entire life, and I hope it's inspiring for the students there as well today, as they go through their athletics and studies at Haverford. But it's right there. It's encouraging to be more than just one thing. Not just a strong mind, not just a strong body, but both. And my Haverford experience was absolutely incredible. I'm so grateful for my time there. And I hope that the work that I'm doing now, which built on all of that experience, is inspiring for you as well. So thank you so much. And I hope I'm able to answer some of your questions.
Ben, thank you so much. That was incredible. At this time, we do encourage you to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Ben, right now I do have a couple questions for you. Do you have any competitors?
That's a great question. Not really. I think there have been a few people who have tried to create similar projects on Instagram and eventually lost interest, and they've kind of tapered off. I guess in some ways you could classify the satellite companies that I partner with as competitors to some extent, because they're often sharing imagery and trying to get it out there in the world. But I don't really view it as competition. I view it more as collaboration, and hopefully I can be someone who can amplify their efforts and get their images to people who wouldn't normally come across them. I think these companies are often focused on connecting with other businesses, other business deals and professionals, where I have kind of a more consumer approach or a more popular approach, you could say, with platforms like Instagram.
That's great. Curious right now, based on what you talk on the relationship that you have built with the satellite companies, how did that come about?
So in the beginning, kind of discovering these images, at first just through Apple Maps, I needed to do a lot of research to figure out who owned them. I didn't want to get sued, or I didn't want, Google, who I thought owned them, to come after me because I was infringing on copyright. So I actually reached out to them just as I was starting this to say, I'm kind of an artist in New York and I want to share your imagery on this blog. Is that okay with you? And they were very responsive and said, that's totally fine as long as you give credit. There were different conversations that needed to be had once money got involved. once there was a book deal, and we were able then to formalize the relationship at first with Maxar, and now this most recent book was done with that whole set of partners that I showed on the slide before. So it's been amazing to see more and more people get interested in working with Overview. And I think that will only continue as more of these satellite companies and space companies launch. So, yeah.
Agreed. So, question from one of our alums: what images have disturbed you? And also, on the flip side, what images have given you the most hope?
That's a great question. One story in particular, I think was disturbing for me to put together. Have been the fires in California. The imagery from the last few years. Maybe it's most personal because I live here and I've inhaled some of that smoke and kind of have lived through it, and have been worried at times about the safety of friends or family because of it. And it's really interesting as I put those images together to kind of disconnect from them for a moment and try to make them as beautiful as possible and as artistic as possible, or just working on the composition. But then it kind of hits you and you kind of snap back into it and you think, I'm looking at a town like Paradise, California, that in the before picture is there, and then after, all of the houses are gone, and you're talking about personal loss and the loss of life, and it's really difficult to look at sometimes. Even removed from a distant vantage point, it's difficult to look at. But I think it's important to show these things. It's important to have a balance, not only of good things, but also these difficult things as well. What images have moved me for the better? I think the examples that I just shared at the end of the presentation speak to the larger effort of the project overall to focus on these bright spots, these innovations, these technologies, these efforts to create a better world. If it's better urban planning, if it's reforestation projects, if it's solar energy or wind energy. I think this is a particularly compelling medium to look at these things and to better understand them, and to educate people about these efforts that are underway. Because the future is not yet written, right? If I'm able to direct 1 million followers towards these locations, towards these stories, that can be influence for the better. So I love hearing about them. I love learning about them. And I think it's important to share them as well.
Well, thank you. Question here from another alumnus. How did you team up with Tim?
So Tim started working with me a couple years before the book was written, helping out with compilation of content on the feed, as well as running some of our business operations. Tim helped do a lot of the writing for the book, and he's now doing freelance afterwards. Yeah.
Awesome. Did you have a favorite art project or teacher at Haverford School?
Ooh, great question. Yeah, I think I was in 3D art with Mr. Nelson, which was something I by no means was talented at. I don't think I'm, naturally gifted painter or draw, or like a sculptor, I should say. But he gave us a lot of free rein to really explore, and was always super supportive of what we're doing. We didn't have, any set format or thing we had to follow. It was just kind of a free rein, I should say, to go in there and kind of make what we wanted with very loose restrictions. So I love that, and spent lots of time in the studio there on a few projects in particular that I can remember.
Great. This is from a fellow crew alum from the class of 1960. Renewable is such an attractive term. Please discuss the heavy metal mining and disposal issues of wind and solar.
It's a good question. By no means do I consider myself an expert on things like renewable energy. So I don't know if I'm qualified to fully answer that. What I will say is that everything that we do as a civilization has some environmental impact. There are certainly setbacks from things like wind and solar, materials that are required to create the solar panels, the water that is used to clean them. And I hope Overview not only speaks to their positives, but also speaks to the full picture, what's required to make these things possible. From my understanding, yes, there are setbacks to these things, but when compared to the burning of oil and the burning of coal, there's significantly better alternatives. And also recognize that we're at a state in this timeline of civilization where we need both, and we're going to need to wean off one to eventually be be hopefully fully renewable. But it's a process, and it's a opportunity, I think, to understand better what is going on.
Thank you. So here's a fun one. Are you still able to get special prints made for specific locations selected by the customer?
Yeah, absolutely. And just around the holidays this year, I worked with a developer to create a new product that's on our website where you can do it yourself. Actually, you can log on to our website, and you can frame it up yourself and make it yourself and review it and compose it, kind of removing myself from the equation, and order a print. And it's been amazing to see what people have selected and what people have created, right? Things that I would have never thought of, or places that have a lot of value to someone, where they got engaged or where their family was from. And it's looking at the world in an entirely new way, and kind of each little section of land might have different meaning to any one of our followers. So yeah.
Great. It looks like the last question I have here for the time being is, do you mind discussing a bit more about how you select, curate, and seek out images? What areas of the world, etc.?
Sure, absolutely. So it's certainly a process that always starts with research. I think overall, the project has always been guided by this focus on the places that humans have impacted the planet. And the fact that we do a daily post every single day has forced us to really, look far and wide for different stories. We don't want to repeat stories unless we have to. So thinking about these different themes: agriculture, mining, energy, urbanization, and starting there, but also taking the visual factor into account, right? If you want to catch people's attention on things like Instagram, you might look through 20 different solar complexes before you find the one that's the most beautiful, or doesn't have clouds over it that day, or whatever it might be, patterns, colors that catches people's attention. Then there's the composition process, where I spend a lot of time either stitching imagery together, or cropping in a certain way, or rotating in a certain way, which is kind of that art historical perspective that I mentioned. And then the last piece is the context. So writing and describing what you're seeing in the image, and kind of bringing it to life in a digestible way, so that people can walk away from it with a few statistics or tidbits, so that they remember, and hopefully learn something from following along. So yeah, I think the process is multifaceted, and it's been fulfilling to tap into those different mindsets of research and writing and artistry, and then marketing it and getting it out there. But again, that's why I love doing this so much. It's combining so many different skills and different kind of elements of a liberal arts education that you get at Haverford. So it's been a dream come true to bring this to life. And again, thank you so much for the opportunity to share the work with everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. One more quick question for you. Now, obviously, you've accomplished quite a bit at a very young age. What do you think's next?
um, that's a great question, and one that I probably should be thinking about quite a bit right now. I'm entertaining the idea of doing another book, and exploring that process. I also want to figure out how to convert I guess you could say, 2 million eyeballs of our Instagram following towards these issues, but to do so in a way that generates actual tangible impact. So figuring out what are the partners we need to work with, be it airlines working on their carbon offset programs, or working on these reforestation projects where a certain number of likes equals a certain number of trees planted. Thinking about ways that we can move beyond just awareness, which I think we've done a great job of over these last few years, to tangible environmental consciousness and impact. And I'm working on a few things that will hopefully be announced in the coming weeks even. And I think things are moving in that direction. So I'm super excited about that, and super grateful to have the opportunity to do it.
Well, thank you so much, Ben. Job well done. This will conclude our alumni in the arena presentation on overview, how we change the earth. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thanks. Bye.